Dialogue is tricky. Any author who's even had a little experience in writing can tell you that. The outcome of a line of dialogue can result in the urge to smash it into the keyboard in hopes that somehow out of the abyss of cringe on your Word document, some form of digestible language will emerge. Well, if you feel this way about your dialogue, then I'm going to do my very best to help you fix it. The problems I see in clunky dialogue usually comes from a lack of foundation for dialogue, and what I mean by that is the writer does not understand dialogue. To do something well, you have to have a basis for it, at least the understanding of the root of the subject. When you don't, it leaves said subject to seem out of place and the creator, author, or writer to seem completely devoid of any knowledge about what on earth they were doing. Now, if you're thinking at this moment, I know what dialogue is, I understand it, well, you need to ask yourself, do you really? And I promise, I'm not trying to drag you down to a simplified level. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page before we can really dig into the bigger stuff. So let's understand dialogue. If we look up a definition of dialogue, we find that defined dialogue is a conversation between two or more people as a feature of a book, play, or movie, and a discussion between two or more people or groups, especially one directed toward the exploration of a particular subject or resolution of a problem. These are the definitions we think of when we hear the word dialogue. But dialogue, although these two definitions are certainly correct, is more than just a defined word. We have to look at dialogue through the eyes of an author, because when we do that, we can truly begin to understand dialogue. For just a second, let's bring ourselves out of the world of writing and take a quick look at the real world. Stories are a way of communication in the world, whether that's communicating an idea like you would find in a nonfiction book, or communicating information like you would find in a textbook. It's all people sharing their thoughts and a piece of their beliefs with everyone else. That's the purpose of a book. Now, when we are going about our everyday lives to communicate with somebody, we don't sit down and write a book to convey an idea. If I'm ordering an iced grande cafe mocha from Starbucks, I don't sit down at a table and write a whole novel to communicate my thoughts to the cashier. Instead, what do? Well, I communicate my ideas orally. Oral communication is how most convey their thoughts and ideas. Now, of course, it isn't always orally. Sign language, motions with your hand, head, etc. convey thoughts and ideas as well, but it's always some form of language. As I've said, the purpose of communication is conveying ideas. These thoughts and ideas are also what reveal your personality. Unlike a book, we don't have a narrating voice providing descriptions about us and other people. It's all done through communication. So let's take this back into the realm of stories. Dialogue can be defined with definitions like I gave earlier, but as you've seen, dialogue is also the communication of thoughts, ideas, and/or someone's person. When you read a good line of dialogue, you will notice how the line always delivers the text with a thought based in the character's person. This is why it's also important to have a defined character voice, but we'll get into that a little later on. So when you're writing a line of dialogue, you always need to keep in mind what your character is doing, who they are, and what they're trying to get across. Now, in a line of dialogue, it isn't just your character talking, it's also you conveying your own thoughts through your character. Isaac Asimov is an author that I've recently come to love, and he's an author of many science fiction stories. The Foundation series and the robot novels are just a few of his works. Something that sticks out to me about his writing, though, is his understanding of dialogue. In fact, what I found rather interesting about his book Foundation is his writing, at least in that book, is predominantly dialogue. The story seems to be progressing through conversations between characters. By bringing this up, I'm not trying to say that your writing should be mostly dialogue too, but I do want to take a look at his dialogue, specifically how he characterizes people through vocalizing their thoughts. Just so that you're aware, there will not be spoilers for Foundation or any of Asimov's works. All I'm doing is looking at the style of his writing. I want to point out a couple things about dialogue that Asimov sneaks in. First off, I mentioned earlier that his writing is particularly dialogue heavy, but if you've read a passage from his work, you'll notice how Asimov uses dialogue tags. For those of you who don't know, a dialogue tag is the part of the dialogue after a person speaks. Usually it's something like he said or she whispered. And dialogue tags are usually used as a description of how the person spoke. But Asimov not only uses dialogue tags as a description of the voice, but also as a description of the character's appearance while they speak and their actions. And what this does for the reader not only provides them a mental picture of the character, but also gives them a break from the dialogue and intake of information. How a character appears and reacts and presents themselves in situations reveals much of their character. Not only does he provide character description through dialogue tags, but he also provides character work through the dialogue. That's so important because that's what dialogue is about. The way a character presents ideas reveals their personality. Think about yourself for a moment. Are there certain ways you talk? Certain words that you use a lot? As an example, I'm from the South, so when I'm talking, I usually say y'all. The thing is, not everyone says y'all. In fact, everyone outside the southern states says you all or you. So when somebody is talking to me and I use the word y'all, that reveals some of my personality and the fact that, more than likely, I'm from a southern state. In Asimov's work, he does something similar to this, to a character which I found to be rather interesting, and the character is a chancellor named Lord Dorwin. And this character doesn't appear very much, but when he does, Asimov makes sure he sticks out in your mind by giving him a quirk. He never pronounces his R's, so his sentences always come out without pronouncing the R's. In the original script of this video, I tried to pronounce what he said. Didn't work out. It was something like, "Cuttingly, my dear fellow," my D fellow. I don't even know. I'll put it up on screen so you can see it, but I am not reading that again. So this gives the character something humorous to be remembered by, but it also adds to what is called his character voice. So let's talk about that next. A character voice is exactly what it sounds like, the character's voice. But the problem is you can't hear a character when reading a book. So how does that work then? Well, when people talk, their voice is only part of what relates their personality to you. The other part is how they say it and what they say. This Chancellor in Asimov's writing not only has this flair to his dialogue, but also seems to brag about himself a lot. So when he's talking about how well-read he is on this subject and all his knowledge on that subject. Voice crack, yikes, okay. But he also does it in a very regal way. You have to know your character to give them a character voice. What do they like? Who are they like? Ask yourself these questions and try to give your characters a unique voice. If you follow everything I've just given you, you have all the tools you need for proper dialogue. Remember the purpose of dialogue. Dialogue is communication. Communication of thoughts and ideas and conveying personality. Remember to use dialogue tags not just as a description of the voice, but also about the rest of them. Something like he whispered and his brows furrowed angrily. We see how he said it, and it's driven home that he's upset by a physical description. And remember to use your character's voice. This is a really important part of your character. Do all this, and I promise that with practice, your dialogue will improve.